Jonah crouched behind a rusted cargo container, the alien scanners sweeping the area with that annoyingly precise rhythm, like a cosmic metronome set to human panic. He wiped a smear of oil off his cheek and muttered, "Why do I always end up in situations that require more coordination than I have thumbs?" His attempt at humor earned him a hiss from the ventilation shaft, which might have been a warning or a very judgmental rat. The space station around him was a labyrinth of jagged metal corridors and flickering lights, some of which had been flickering so long that he suspected they were trying to communicate Morse code in a language even the aliens wouldn't recognize. Jonah had spent 3 days here now, running from alien hunters whose idea of subtlety was to set off a series of exploding drones whenever he so much as sneezed. The first day had been chaotic, the second had been exhausting, and the third was now shaping up to be absolutely ridiculous. He peered around the corner. A hunter's foot, tipped with what looked like graviton-stabilized boots, hovered just above the ground. Jonah swallowed, thinking that if he had $1 for every time he'd imagined being squashed by alien tech, he could probably buy a small moon. With no clear plan except to not die in the next 60 seconds, he rolled behind a stack of crates that wobbled ominously. One toppled, landing with a loud clang that made him groan. "Well, that's subtle," he whispered to himself. The foot turned. Scanner's word. Jonah froze, realizing too late that he had forgotten one crucial element of survival. Humans are not invisible, not to scanners, not to aliens, definitely not to scanners operated by aliens who thought subtlety was an urban legend. Then, from the observation deck above, a figure appeared. Jonah squinted, trying to reconcile the shape with logic. She looked human enough, slim, agile, wearing some kind of sleek suit, but her ears were long and elegant, arching upwards in a way that made her seem more like a wind-tuned instrument than a predator. She was staring at him with a faint, amused expression like he was a poorly executed hologram in some cosmic art exhibit. Jonah blinked. "Oh, great, someone who can actually see me without me exploding. Fantastic." She tilted her head and her ears twitched. Jonah took this as either a warning or a polite hello. He decided to choose optimism. "Hi, I'm just a human, totally harmless, mostly harmless, maybe slightly annoying." She raised an eyebrow, or at least the alien equivalent of one, and Jonah felt absurdly grateful that sarcasm was universal. He bolted. The corridors twisted like tangled wires, and Jonah's footsteps echoed against the metal, a percussion section for his solo act of panicked improvisation. He ducked into a maintenance shaft, knocking over a panel that fell with an ungainly clatter. He cursed, muttering that gravity had it out for him personally, and slid into the darkness. Somewhere above, he could hear the hunter's scanners humming. Somewhere else, probably in a dimension he would never visit, he imagined aliens giggling at the humans' lack of grace. "If you're laughing, you're allowed to keep your dignity," he told the empty shaft. The shaft ejected him into a section of the station where the air smelled faintly of ozone and burnt circuits, the remnants of experiments long abandoned. Jonah stumbled over a console, and a holographic map blinked to life. He poked it. Buttons, lights, and confusing alien symbols popped up, and for a moment he felt like a chef in a chemistry lab, unsure whether he had created a delicious souffle or triggered a chain reaction that would vaporize half the station. He pressed a symbol that resembled a smiling geometric face. The map zoomed in on the section where the hunters were patrolling. Jonah took a deep breath and thought, "Well, if I survive this, at least I'm qualified to be a galactic strategist." Then he tripped over a cable. The map went haywire, lights flashing in rapid sequences that could easily be mistaken for some alien Morse code poem about human incompetence. Above him, Arya leaned over the railing, watching the chaos with a tilt of her head. Jonah guessed she had been following him silently for most of the day, her presence both comforting and terrifying. Her ears flicked at the sound of his clumsy navigation, and he wondered if they picked up subtleties of sound that were beyond human comprehension. He waved awkwardly. "Hi, yes, I'm alive, barely, please don't judge too harshly." She didn't respond verbally, but the faint smile tugging at her lips made Jonah feel like he had achieved something momentous. Somewhere in the universe, maybe an alien was keeping score, and he was winning by points he didn't understand. Jonah ducked into an old maintenance bay, the floor slick with oil and who knows what else. He picked up a long pipe, holding it as a weapon, because strategy was apparently optional and improvisation mandatory. "Okay, universe," he whispered, "let's see what you've got. And yes, I know I look ridiculous, but sometimes that's the secret weapon." He poked at the floor with the pipe, making sparks jump as it touched a live conduit. The lights flickered, and for a moment he thought he had blinded the hunters. In reality, he had just illuminated his own potential for electrocution. Then a hatch hissed open. Jonah froze. He prepared to plead for mercy or make a joke that would buy him a few seconds. A group of hunters entered, scanning the bay. Jonah crouched behind an oil drum, wiggling like a particularly guilty worm. They passed. Jonah exhaled, muttering, "Note to self, worm tactics actually work, who knew?" The hunters moved on, leaving Jonah alone, save for Arya, who stepped into the bay with her ears brushing lightly against the controls, scanning the area with deliberate calm. Jonah looked at her, breathless, oil-streaked, and completely unheroic. "So," he said, trying to sound confident, "you following me because you're impressed by my skills or because I'm really, really good at running like a madman?" She tilted her head, her long ears twitching. Jonah took this as approval. "Right, humble, effective, and slightly ridiculous, got it." As he trailed behind her, he felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. He was just a human, yes, completely ordinary and wholly unprepared for this galaxy's deadly stakes. And yet somehow, in the middle of chaos, danger, and aliens with more precision than a quantum algorithm, Jonah had discovered the first spark of courage. Or insanity, maybe both. And for the first time, he realized that surviving didn't have to be boring, even if it did require tripping over a lot of things along the way. The station rumbled as distant explosions shook the walls. Jonah stumbled, caught himself on a railing, and muttered, "Well, that's one way to add drama." Arya glanced at him, and though she didn't speak, the faint upward curve of her mouth suggested she understood something Jonah hadn't quite realized. Surviving a galaxy on the brink of war might be terrifying, but it could also be, in the oddest way, kind of funny. And so, they moved forward together, human and alien, fear and laughter intertwined, each step a precarious mix of luck, wit, and utter absurdity, while the hunters continued their endless, futile pursuit. Jonah followed Arya through the twisting corridors of the abandoned space station, trying desperately not to step on anything that might explode or summon more alien hunters. "You know," he said, panting, "I think if I survive this, I'm going to write a book called Running Like an Idiot Through Space, a survival guide for the clumsy human. Chapter 1, Don't Trip on Literally Everything." Arya's ears twitched at the corner of her helmeted head, and Jonah interpreted that as either amusement or a silent reprimand. He preferred to believe it was amusement. They entered a chamber that smelled faintly of ozone and something he hoped was not decomposing alien rations. Panels flickered on and off in a random rhythm, lighting up the room like a disco abandoned for decades. Jonah poked at one of the consoles, and a holographic map sprang to life, displaying the station's layout and several moving dots he assumed were hunters. "Oh, perfect," he said. "A live strategy board. Only, you know, the kind that could also electrocute me at any second." Arya leaned over his shoulder, her long ears brushing the display, adjusting its projection with a gentle flick. Jonah flinched. "Hey, careful. That's highly sensitive technology, and by sensitive I mean I'll probably die if you touch it wrong." She tilted her head, clearly unimpressed by his dramatics, and activated a route that bypassed several patrols. Jonah felt a surge of gratitude and also mild embarrassment that she had solved what had taken him 10 minutes of random button pressing and wild gesturing. They moved into the cargo bay, where malfunctioning hover platforms drifted above molten pits. Jonah's first instinct was to inspect the platforms as if examining them could somehow guarantee his safety. "So, let me get this straight," he said aloud. "We either jump across a series of floating death traps or we, don't. And the not option involves fiery death, got it, totally sane plan." Arya glanced at him, her ears twitching, and Jonah decided this was definitely her version of a smirk. He took a deep breath, glanced at the nearest platform, and leapt, landing with the grace of a drunken jellyfish. "I'm fine, totally fine, no explosions, yet." He scrambled across the next platform, narrowly avoiding a plasma conduit that sparked like miniature lightning. "Seriously," he muttered, "they should include lessons on physics in alien hunting school, or at least hazard pay." Once safely across, they entered a maintenance corridor stacked with crates of what appeared to be alien snacks. Jonah paused, peering at the contents. "Do you think it's safe to eat this?" he asked. Arya raised an eyebrow. "Maybe not." Jonah shrugged and popped one into his mouth. "Well, I'm a pioneer for science." He chewed and immediately made a face, realizing the flavor was some horrid combination of metallic and sweet. "Yep, definitely science. Delicious science." Arya shook her head, her ears flicking in a way that suggested both disbelief and mild amusement. Jonah grinned through his grimace. "Trust me, it builds character and possibly regret." They reached a docking bay where a derelict shuttle rested on a half-floating platform. Jonah approached cautiously, tapping on the hull. "So this is our ride, huh? Looks space-worthy enough. Maybe." Arya examined the controls with her fingers tracing delicate patterns over the alien technology. Jonah peered over her shoulder. "Wait, are you telling me you can actually operate this thing?" She gave him a look, and Jonah instantly regretted asking. "Of course I can," she said, her voice carrying a quiet confidence that made him feel like a bumbling child. "You, on the other hand, seem to have an impressive talent for almost getting killed." He laughed nervously. "Thank you, I'll add that to my resume." The shuttle hummed as they prepared for departure, and Jonah noticed several small devices on the control panel that pulsed with eerie light. "What are those?" he asked. "Traps? Death buttons?" Arya glanced at him. "They're stabilizers, keep the shuttle from tearing itself apart when entering a gravity well." Jonah nodded. "Ah, stabilizers, important, got it. Good thing I didn't touch them, huh?" Arya's ears twitched again, and Jonah concluded that her amusement was directly proportional to his panic. As they lifted off, the station shrinking behind them, Jonah couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. "So," he said, gripping a console for dear life, "we've got hunters who are apparently allergic to subtlety, a space station that actively wants to kill me, and a shuttle that could explode if I sneeze. Just another typical day in space." Arya laughed once, a soft sound that made Jonah feel slightly less like he was one step away from becoming space debris. "I promise it gets more fun," she said. Jonah eyed her skeptically. "Fun? You mean like intergalactic bowling with plasma grenades?" She tilted her head, and Jonah decided that the mystery was part of her charm. They navigated through a dense asteroid field, the shuttle dodging jagged rock formations with Arya's precise maneuvers and Jonah's panicked suggestions. "Left, no, wait, right, watch that one, it's got spikes." Oh, too late. Each collision was accompanied by sparks and the occasional alarm blaring in a high-pitched wail that Jonah found both terrifying and hilariously dramatic. "Remind me never to fly with anyone else," he gasped, clinging to the console. Arya's ears twitched in amusement, brushing against the holographic displays as she guided them skillfully. The hunters were not far behind, and Jonah attempted to devise a plan. "Okay, so if we, maybe trick them with decoy drones or throw out some kind of, oh, I don't know, space confetti?" Arya blinked at him. "Space confetti?" Jonah nodded solemnly. "Very tactical, distracts, dazzles, possibly annoys, works on humans, maybe aliens too." She shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "We'll see." By the time they reached a derelict warship abandoned in orbit, the shuttle had sustained minor damage. Jonah had eaten 3 questionable alien snacks, and both had narrowly avoided being shredded by energy turrets. They docked with the warship, and Jonah staggered onto the deck. "Well," he said, brushing dust and oil off his suit, "we survived, mostly, and I didn't even die from candy poisoning." Arya stepped beside him, her long ears brushing lightly against his shoulder in a gesture that was both comforting and alien. Jonah paused. "Hey, thanks for, not letting me become space dust. I appreciate it, mostly." She didn't respond verbally, but the faint upward curve of her mouth suggested she understood. Jonah took this as a huge victory. They began exploring the warship, discovering that it was rigged with automated defenses and strange alien technology that hummed with latent power. Jonah poked at a control panel and lights blinked erratically. "I feel like this could either teleport us somewhere safe or summon a herd of angry space cows," he said. Arya glanced at him. "Space cows are not a known threat." Jonah nodded seriously, "Yet give them time." She shook her head, suppressing a laugh. Jonah grinned. "See, humor, it's part of my survival toolkit." As the chapter drew to a close, Jonah realized that the galaxy was both more dangerous and more absurd than he could have imagined. He had survived another day narrowly with humor as his shield and Arya's calm precision as his guide. Somewhere in the depths of space, hunters continued their pursuit, but for now, he had learned a crucial lesson. Courage could take the form of improvisation, luck, and a relentless ability to make bad jokes at the worst possible moments. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to stay alive, at least until the next ridiculous challenge appeared. Jonah floated through the control corridor of the derelict warship, his hands gripping the rails like a man who had discovered midlife that gravity had betrayed him personally. "Okay," he muttered, "we're either about to save the galaxy or make a very spectacular light show that probably violates interstellar safety codes." Arya moved beside him, ears flicking with quiet amusement, her fingers brushing over holographic controls that shimmered with alien energy. "Spectacular, yes," she said, her tone dry, "and mostly avoidable." Jonah blinked. Mostly avoidable? He decided that Arya had redefined encouragement. The alien hunters were converging on their location, alerted by the earlier shuttle maneuvers and Jonah's impromptu decoy drones, which he insisted counted as tactical genius. "If I survive this, I want a medal," he whispered, scanning the flickering corridors. "Or at least a t-shirt that says, 'I outran alien death and all I got was this lousy trauma.'" Arya tilted her head and Jonah swore her long ears twitched in rhythm with his own heartbeat. It was strangely comforting and terrifying at the same time. Jonah stepped up to a console that pulsed with an ominous light, the heart of the warship's energy core. "So this is it, huh?" he said. "One wrong button and boom, right? Or, maybe just mildly embarrassing sparks. Either way, I'm ready." Arya's hand touched his shoulder, steadying him, and Jonah realized he was no longer entirely alone in his chaotic improvisation. "You'll need to synchronize the core's output with my adjustments," she said, "and try not to electrocute yourself." Jonah grinned. "Electrocution is just a suggestion, right?" She ignored him, which he took as approval. They worked in tandem, Jonah fumbling through alien symbols while Arya guided him with calm precision. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and Jonah whispered jokes to keep the tension at bay. "Did you know," he said, "in a previous life I would have been terrible at all of this?" "Shocking, I know." Arya's ears twitched and he assumed that was laughter. If not, it was the universe telling him he was completely insane. Either way, progress was being made. The hunters breached the outer corridors. Jonah peeked through a viewport and saw their precise, lethal formations. "Great," he muttered, "they really do not mess around. I've never seen organized chaos executed with such terrifying accuracy." Arya's fingers danced over controls, sending holographic decoys and misdirecting their scanners. Jonah leaned over, watching in awe. I think I'm learning something. It's called not dying, very useful skill." The hunters closed in, and Jonah realized the final gambit required audacity bordering on absurdity. "Okay, so here's the plan," he whispered. "We pretend to surrender and then bam, total chaos. Totally normal, heroic, and not terrifying at all." Arya glanced at him. "You mean ridiculous," Jonah grinned. "Exactly. Ridiculous works in my favor." They stepped into the open chamber, weapons raised but faces composed, Jonah doing his best to appear confident rather than terrified. The hunters stopped, assessing, and Jonah whispered a few improvised alien phrases he barely understood, hoping they sounded convincing. Arya's eyes flicked over him, clearly doubting his pronunciation. Jonah noticed her ears twitch and whispered, "I'm charming, right?" She didn't answer, which he decided was also a form of approval. At the critical moment, Jonah triggered the warship's core sequence, sending a pulse through the hunters' tracking devices. Alarms screamed, consoles sparked, and for a moment the hunters were thrown into disarray, their precise formation collapsing under the unpredictability of Jonah's improvisation. "See?" he shouted over the din, "improvisation, chaos. Also, maybe sparks, but mostly chaos." Arya moved with fluid precision, neutralizing their immediate threats while guiding Jonah through the remaining adjustments. One by one, the hunters withdrew, their advance thwarted by the combination of Jonah's absurd ingenuity and Arya's disciplined strategy. Jonah leaned against a console, catching his breath. "Wow, that actually worked." "Did you see that?" Arya's ears flicked, a subtle smile on her lips. Jonah realized he had survived not because he was just a human, but because he had learned to embrace his unpredictability, his humor, and his ability to think outside the box, or, in this case, outside the space station. With the immediate threat gone, Jonah and Arya took a moment to survey the warship, its systems stabilizing under Arya's guidance. Jonah sighed, wiping grime from his face. You know, I came into this thinking I was just a human. Turns out, maybe humans are good at surviving precisely because we're not predictable. And slightly ridiculous, mostly ridiculous. Arya's faint smile widened just enough for Jonah to feel victory, relief, and a strange warmth all at once. They moved to the observation deck, looking out at the stars streaking past as the warship stabilized into orbit. Jonah, still catching his breath, realized that the galaxy was no less dangerous, no less vast, and no less chaotic than before, but he had changed. He had learned courage not in the form of muscle or weaponry, but in humor, adaptability, and the willingness to act even when the odds were impossibly against him. Arya stood beside him, her ears brushing lightly against his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of partnership, trust, and perhaps something deeper. Jonah tapped the railing, shaking his head. So we survived, hunters withdrew. I didn't explode, and somehow I made it here alive with only a minor amount of screaming. Arya tilted her head. Minor, Jonah shrugged. Perspective, also survival tactics, and maybe just a hint of luck. Arya's ears twitched in amusement, brushing against the panel as she activated the warship's course, setting them on a trajectory toward the unsettled edges of known space. He realized with an almost dizzying clarity that his journey had transformed him. He was no longer just a human. He was someone who could face alien hunters, navigate deadly warships, survive improbable dangers, and still make jokes about questionable alien snacks. He could improvise, endure, and even laugh when the universe seemed determined to crush him. Most importantly, he had discovered a fragile but undeniable trust with someone who had once seemed an impossible ally. As they drifted into the vastness of space, Jonah glanced at Arya and she met his gaze, her long ears catching the light of distant stars. So,